We are up. We are live. Okay. Uhuru, comrades, and welcome to today's Omali Taught Me Sunday Study featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela. My name is Akilia Anai, Director of Agitation and Propaganda for the African People's Socialist Party, as well as your MC for this morning. Today's study is highly important, and we encourage you right now to share the stream, invite your friends and family to it so that as many of our people can be involved in this discussion. This week, the chairman finishes Vanguard Up, Unity of Theory and Practice, the political report to the first 7th Congress Plenary of the African People's Socialist Party, resuming from the section Black is Back Coalition on page 84. You can find the study materials in the Facebook and YouTube descriptions. Throughout the political report, the chairman has been summing up the state of our departments and institutions and putting forward mandates that each one must take on. Today, we continue with the Black is Back Coalition, which is chaired by Party Chairman Omali Yeshitela and founded during the first election of the U.S. neocolonial puppet Barack Hussein Obama. We will also discuss the African National Women's Organization, led by President Yejide Odumila. ANWO was founded as a political strategy to address the special oppression of African women and to bring us into active political life as leaders, makers, and shapers of history. As a part of an anti-colonial struggle, negating bourgeois ideological pitfalls such as that of feminism, womanism, etc. So I would like to take this opportunity now to introduce the brilliant African internationalist theoretician, the revolutionary strategist behind this political report, the leader of the African Socialist International and African Nation, our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela.
Uhuru. First of all, I'd like to express my appreciation to you, Comrade Akile, for the introduction and for all that you do in the Department of Agitation and Propaganda for the party. And then secondly, what I would like to do is to use this occasion. I don't often get an opportunity to do something like this, to share, to express my real appreciation for the fact that today is the birthday of my younger brother, Chimarenga Salambayo. He is my brother in so many ways, and including biologically, as they say, the brother from the same mother, if you will. And he is very dear to me, to our party. He has been in the movement since he was 17 years old, and that's a bit of a time. And just want to say a happy revolutionary birthday to you, Comrade Chimarenga. Secondly, I'm going to really struggle to be expeditious in this study today. As you know, we are also engaged in a conference that's a Black is Back Coalition conference that starts almost immediately as this study ends. So I'm going to try and end just a few minutes earlier so that I can rush and participate in that. So it is interesting that this part of the political report to the first plenary of the 7th Congress does deal with the Black is Back Coalition. And I want to say that coalitions can be very important. But what must be understood from our perspective, that coalitions cannot make a revolution in the interest of the class, working class. Coalitions, by their very definition, usually is comprised of various kinds of class forces. And what we've been working on now for nearly 50 years is the consolidation development of the African People's Socialist Party, which is the party of the African working class. It is a class party. It is like all parties, whether they acknowledge it or not, are class parties. They represent particular classes, and sometimes, and most times, when you talk about coalitions and fronts and things like that, they also represent different classes, but it provides an opportunity for class forces to sort of hide in the coalition within these organizations without having to identify themselves as specific class forces. So we're the African People's Socialist Party, and we're starting on page 84, the first full paragraph. The history of the African People's Socialist Party in creating people's courts and tribunals to put imperialist oppressors and imperialism on trial is our way of working for independent anti-colonial state power under the leadership of the African working class. For example, the party initiated fight for Black community control of the police is designed to win the masses of African people to actively challenge the hegemony or authority of the domestic colonial military state apparatus and begin the process of replacing it with the power of African people as led by its advanced detachment, the African People's Socialist Party. We're talking now about the state, the state apparatus, and the state is this organization really that represents a monopoly of violence, a monopoly of force in the possession of a particular class force, that of a particular class that in any society is the dominant class. When the colonial grand jury of St. Louis County refused to indict the domestic colonial military murderer of Mike Brown in Ferguson, St. Louis, in 2014, our party organized a Black People's Grand Jury to try Darren Wilson, the murderer. This was a demonstration of what the state looks like in the hands of the colonized. It was a state power that negated the colonial state power, a state power that has not yet achieved the coercive power of the military to enforce the guilty verdict. Nevertheless, the People's Grand Jury was able to establish the trajectory toward consciousness of its needs. You know, we did the grand jury to deal with the indicting the murderer of Mike Brown, because the colonial capitalist state refused to do it. They just didn't do it. They played with it for a long period of time to try to give the impression of being some kind of democratic process. And then because it was a grand jury that doesn't have to explain anything and happens behind closed doors, et cetera, just came out and said, nope, the guy he shouldn't be indicted. And that's despite all kinds of contradictions that we know about. So what we did was we say we have an African people, a Black people's grand jury. We use the same evidence, et cetera, and in so doing, the objective was to negate the colonial capitalist state power that held that first farce that they call a grand jury. We call it a mock grand jury. We negated that with the establishment of a legitimate grand jury that was organized in the African community by African people to go over the same evidence. This was not some mock farcical thing that we were doing. This was part of the process that we have been using, are using, to negate the influence, the power, the authority of colonialism in our lives, over our lives, et cetera. In the 2019 slogan of the Black is Back Coalition Washington, D.C. mobilization, turn imperialist wars into wars against imperialism, advanced our struggle closer to a generalized anti-colonial political reality. This gave us an opening to direct and navigate a movement beyond defensive protests against US aggressions against others who are under obvious immediate fire from US imperialism. Our objective is to deepen the crisis of imperialism by joining with others, fighting against it, and broadening consciousness of a collective responsibility to fight wherever we are. We must develop, influence, and participate in forcing US imperialism to fight for its very life within the US. We must lay siege to the gates of Rome, and like the legendary Hannibal of Carthage, give the empire no choice but to preoccupy itself with its own survival. This means directly challenging and so-called anti-imperialist movement that does not engage in joining the fight by the colonized against every manifestation of US domestic and settler colonialism. And what happens too often during this era is that so-called leftists and so-called anti-imperialists and so-called peace forces, what they would do is express solidarity with those who are under attack by imperialism. They might even send care packages. They might even go to the particular countries under siege, etc. But the problem isn't that in most instances, certainly it's not the major problem, that there is not an audience watching what the US is doing. The problem is the US can do this without having to defend itself inside its own borders. You have an imperial power that exports violence and terror and colonialism all around the world. And it's not just good enough to stand up and say, to go to the places and, like sometimes revolutionary tourists. I saw that happen in Grenada when you had all of these Africans who loved revolution and went to Grenada. And then when the US Marines invaded the country, they came back on the same ships that the Marines came on to invade the country. They didn't do a single thing to defend the country. In fact, the only defenders of the country were middle-aged Cuban workers who were building an airport there. So there's a sort of a revolutionary tourism. What has to happen is that it's not good enough just to express solidarity, but we have to act solidarity. Che Guevara once said that solidarity is not about well-wishing, but it's sharing the same fate, whether in victory or in death. And what has to happen is that those of us who recognize that we are oppressed, we have to fight here. We have to make the struggle happen here. We have to heat up the struggle. We have to develop an actual movement that has this design on taking power. And that's the only way that the imperialists will be stopped. So we say this means directly challenging an anti-imperialist movement that does not engage in joining the fight by the colonized against every manifestation of US domestic and settler colonialism. In the US, we must demand that the white settler, colonial leftists, and so-called anti-imperialists actively and vigorously unite with the African-led struggle for reparations to African people. They must unite with the revolutionary struggle of Africans against parasitic or colonialist capitalism. This is an attack on the jugular vein of world imperialism currently under the shaky leadership of US capitalism. The legitimacy of the settler colonial left or anti-imperialists will henceforth be determined by their willingness to really destroy the capitalist system that gave birth to and sustains the settler colonial ruling class, as well as those identified as the settler colonial working class. And this is a fundamental kind of contradiction that we're talking about, because there is this system, this parasitic relationship that where white power, imperialism attached itself to the oppressed of the world, to the Africans and others, and this is where capitalism comes from. The capitalist system didn't simply give birth to the bourgeoisie, it gave birth also to the working class. And so what we have to have is a unity with the settler colonial leftists or anti-imperialists here, and the so-called colonial leftists in Europe and what have you, with the oppressed peoples of the world, to struggle against the system itself, and not just how that system manifests itself in a way that makes them uncomfortable. This is not a call for the settler colony leftists to pick up weapons and take to the bush. It is recognition that the most potent weapon in the fight against capitalism is solidarity under the leadership of the African working class through its advanced detachment. They must extend their call for release of the respectable settler colonial political prisoners and demand the immediate and unconditional release of imprisoned members of the Black Liberation Army, Leonard Peltier, and others, a demand that ultimately must include every African imprisoned within the US colonial prison system. We've seen, rather recently, a just call for the release of certain people who have been in prison, and they are political prisoners, and there's the white guys, most of whom I'm talking about. But that's not enough, because even these white guys, they, that we're talking about, they are respectable political prisoners. When I say respectable, they are political prisoners because they people who fell, who were imprisoned because they were fighting against an injustice or imposition of an anti-democratic act within the oppressor nation itself. And what we have when we have like the BLA, we have Peltier, they're talking about changing entire relationship with the settlers colonial state. If the BLA is successful, if the indigenous people are successful in the struggle they're making, it overturns the whole system. It's not a matter of fighting for a better, greater democracy within the capitalist system, because democracy is simply a form of the state. It doesn't say anything about what it is really about. So they have this democratic process in the United States that rests upon the oppression of African and indigenous and other people. And so it's not good enough just to fight for the democratic process, to just only fight for the democratic process within this capitalist system. It's necessary to be willing to fight to overturn the capitalist system that rests upon the oppression of Africans and indigenous people ourselves. So we say success in freeing respectable political prisoners incarcerated for defense of democracy in general, which is a capitalist democracy that we're talking about, only serves to perfect the system of colonial capitalism. Freeing African political prisoners and prisoners of war is most often an attack on the system itself. The settler colonial leftists must engage in the struggle behind enemy lines, so to speak, by joining the African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the Vanguard Party. We have identified the Achilles heel of imperialist white power to be the colonial enslavement of Africans in the US and the world, along with the internal colonies of the barrios and concentration camps called Indian reservations. This will also constitute the necessary war against the opportunist virus that infects the body politic of white rights, settler colonial radicalism, and constrains the worldwide anti-imperialist revolution. And that's what we're looking at, a white rights movement. Even when people are talking about this coronavirus thing, it's only incidental that African people are involved in this discussion. It's like what we saw happen with the so-called with the towers when they were destroyed, and suddenly all of the white people and all the African people were all buddies, and that's when everybody learned that white people knew the words, the lyrics to "We Shall Overcome," and standing around and rocking "We Shall Overcome" in the middle of this whole thing. That's the thing that made us appear to be buddies. But the fact is that there's a form of opportunism that makes us friends now. You're my friend now. That's where you become a part of the 90% now. You never heard word this before. And so now you have the coronavirus, okay, liquidate, just forget the fact, that's what we're being told, of the 300,000 Black people who died in the earthquake in Haiti. Let's forget the fact of the number of people who died with Ebola, from Ebola, or the number of people who were murdered by cholera by the US-led UN forces in Haiti, cholera that had never been there before. All of the stuff that happens to us on a regular basis is never addressed. You become the 99%, you become a part of the 99% at that point where you are infected or affected by it. It's like a lot of other things that we could talk about, but we won't. But we're saying that it's not good enough. The white left or the so-called anti-imperialists, the so-called peace movement just can't sit on the sidelines while the rest of the world is being destroyed inconveniently when something affects you. Now there's this great contradiction. The world has to rise up, and all of your Black brothers and sisters, et cetera, join the fight. You've been absent without, what do you call it? AWOL? without leave for a long time. So, this opportunism has to be struggled. It has to be fought against. You can't concede to it. We cannot concede to it. And none of the people who claim to be part of the revolution, our movement, should be able to get away with offering apologies for a so-called white left that's only left when it comes to its own affairs, but cannot be left when it comes to uniting with the struggles of the peoples that would ultimately lead to the destruction of the system itself. The African People's Socialist Party recognized that it is appropriate to protest all imperialist wars against the peoples of the world. Our party's history is replete. With organization of and participation in such protests. However, we also recognize, excuse me, that it is necessary to move beyond mere protest, which is done too easily by liberals, leftists, pacifists, and a wide variety of opportunists. We realize that imperialism means war. War between the imperialist powers and the peoples whose lands and resources are most often the primary basis of war between imperialist forces contending for the lands and resources. Often, as in Africa, they use African proxies that obscure their presence as foreign imperialists. Imperialism in deep existential crisis means permanent warfare, waged against the peoples whose land and resources constitute the pedestal upon which the entire global capitalist system relies for success and survival. The slogan for the November 2019 Black is Back Coalition rally, march, and conference was a call to turn opposition to imperialist wars into opposition to imperialism itself. The mass turnout for the coalition rally, march, and conference clearly contributed to our efforts to provide ideological leadership to the normally white, colonially dominated peace anti-war movement. And although, like most people, we hate wars in general, we are not pacifists. And our party does support and believe in wars of national liberation. It is the anti-colonial wars that will destroy the imperialist system. Imperialism is responsible for the wars and suffering of the people in so many ways, including those that are not even regarded as warfare. They do this to maintain imperialist class domination that rests on the foundation of the national oppression of Africans and the majority of the world. The Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations is an organization of organizations, institutions, and personalities that spans the political and ideological spectrum within the liberation movement inside the US. This necessarily means that contention is a natural feature of the coalition. It is an organization of unity and struggle, where unity has been the predominant feature up to now, allowing the coalition to exist against all odds for going on 11 years. Our work with the coalition is yet another concrete example of the party's commitment to the unity of theory and practice. What can national liberation mean without the practical means for the colonized nation to exercise anti-colonial unity? The coalition's principles of unity, along with its national Black political agenda for self-determination, unites a broad sector of the African nation in a developing revolutionary national democratic program to defeat colonialism. This is where the importance of winning larger numbers of members into our party stands out in bold relief. How else will we be capable of carrying out anti-colonial strategy within the coalition if we do not continue to grow? Our party's work has raised the level of the ideological, political, and organizational capacity of the entire anti-colonial struggle, including that of the African petty bourgeoisie and opportunists in general. This is only problematic if the party does not grow, bringing in the new members from among the masses being awakened by our ideological, political, and organizational work. Some of our petty bourgeois contenders and the formations of other opportunists are clearly growing because of the techniques and philosophical advances they have acquired through direct or indirect connection with our party. This speaks volumes about our need to correct our practice, and demand greater discipline and adherence to the principles and protocols of the party, along with the mandates and resolutions stemming from the 7th Congress of our party. This speaks to the need for party members to vanguard up. We must learn to professionalize our party fraction work within the coalition in order to give the coalition the benefit of African internationalist organizational experience in recruitment, discipline, political and organizational and ideological clarity and sacrifice. Members of our party play important roles in the coalition structure, and to vanguard up means to do more than simply hold a position. It means to take responsibility for the success of the coalition. It means to anticipate problems and to utilize creative means to build the coalition going beyond simple task mastering. The African National Women's Organization. The African National Women's Organization, ANWO, has not yet achieved the kind of membership growth that is beginning to characterize NPDOM. However, after much trial and error and struggle to define its political line and acquire organizational capacity, there's definite development. This is most obvious with Decolonize ANWO's economic project. ANWO's ideological influence is also outsized, filling a serious ideological and political vacuum in an arena that has been previously occupied by the African petty bourgeois neo-colonialist contenders under the guise of Black feminism. The petty bourgeois pop imperialist feminist philosophy imposed on our struggle is finding fertile ground among the petty bourgeoisie of every nationality. Related pseudo pop philosophical concepts as intersectionality seek to equate the lifestyle politics of the petty bourgeoisie with the struggle for the anti-colonialist liberation of African and other colonized subjects. There's this phenomenon that we recognize, this pop philosophy, where a lot of stuff that's popular at the moment, just throw it in, and it doesn't have to have some kind of scientific or materialist basis, but it's cool, and that's the kind of thing. So intersectionality and a whole bunch of other things that being thrown at us in a means by which to deflect masses of the working people away from scientific ideological clarity and direction and organization. Similarly, the fight against patriarchy is being offered to African women as a diversion from the primary contradiction of colonial capitalism that mercilessly oppresses African men, women, and children. ANWO also appears poised to tackle the serious class-based contradiction afflicting the organization because of the fact that initially the majority of African women attracted to ANWO were petty bourgeois in their class outlook and social location. African women in general, however, appear unwilling to see themselves as occupying a condition as women separate from the general colonial condition of our people. Many politically undeveloped working class women may have incorrectly assumed the creation of ANWO to be just another self-serving middle class exercise. Obviously, African women catch hell from a variety of sources, but most African women appear not to have improperly abstracted themselves and their reality as separate from our colonized, mostly working class African people as a whole. This is because the majority of African women are of the working class, and unlike the feminist petty bourgeoisie, do not seek answers and solutions that distinguish themselves and their lot from that of our whole people. Recent reports from ANWO leadership appear to indicate an approach to the work that is informed by this class assessment, and I am certain that moving forward, holding fast to African internationalist organizational principles, we will see even greater growth in the work and development of ANWO. Additionally, the leadership of the party, the entire Central Committee, and our chairman must mobilize greater party participation in ANWO through existing members and through targeted recruitment of women into the party who will be assigned to ANWO as their primary area of responsibility. However, notwithstanding the role in growing ANWO that the Central Committee must play, the primary responsibility for ANWO's success lies at the feet of Comrade Yeshitela Orunmila, its leader. In the party, the overall performance and quality of leadership exemplified by African women has historically set us apart. In the revolutionary movement and within the US, more than 50% of the party's Central Committee are women. ANWO does not ghettoize the role of African women in our party. We do not have a special place in the party reserved for women. Nor do we utilize some formula that requires dual gender-based leadership with co-chairs consisting of men and women. The role of women in the party leadership is as equal members with decision-making powers around every question and issue confronting the African nation and working class, as well as the issues roiling the political equilibrium of the world. ANWO is an additional responsibility on the Central Committee dedicated to bringing African women into revolutionary political life, the Uhuru movement, and the party. The political report to our party's fifth Congress makes this point abundantly clear, and I'm quoting: ANWO could become the powerful home to African women who are constantly under some form of assault by a myriad of contradictions peculiar to African women. ANWO would provide a mass organization for women who need to confront their oppression and exploitation. It would allow the party to develop a reserve for the revolution through helping women to recognize the universal contradiction confronting our people and class that are located in the specific contradictions that they are confronting as women. The theory of the equality of African women and men, as expressed in point 9 of the party's 14-point platform, is made concrete in the practice of our party, as revealed in our history and the organizational work being waged through ANWO. The existence of ANWO is simply one manifestation of the determination of the African People's Socialist Party to complete the Black Revolution of the 60s. It is testimony of the resoluteness of our party that African women will not be left behind again in a post-revolutionary situation without an equal share in the political power to build the new world to which all our efforts are directed. Mandates and the way forward. Vanguard Up means that members of our party deepen our direct involvement in the party's economic work. Up to now, this has mostly meant that party members support the various economic institutions of our party and movement. However, it must mean more than this. Vanguard Up must mean party members make timely dues payment to contribute to our organization. When we pay our dues as called for, it indicates our unity with the party. Additionally, party members must make financial contributions to our party. We are a party of African working class, but even poor Africans believe deeply enough to support churches and preachers who they make rich. Surely African internationalists, materialists, have as much belief in the future we are constructing with our own hands and efforts as impoverished, hoodwinked, philosophical idealists we are supposed to lead out of the material hell they have to endure daily. Coming out of this plenary, I am also calling on party members to allow the masses of our people to participate in the economic development of our nation, as laid out under the section on the office of Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela. We are involved in several projects, more than 50 by some accounts, that promote African economic development. We have mentioned some of them. They range from a planned microloan program, furniture stores, radio stations, Black Power blueprint, anti-gentrification, community resurrection and development, the Brenningsville newspaper, Uhuru Foods and Pies, to name only a few. We must allow the people to participate in supporting these efforts of economic self-determination. In the process, we build greater security for our anti-colonial economic development projects by allowing the people to become stakeholders, so to speak. The people must be willing to see these economic projects as their own. We must begin to include the presence and significance of these projects in our speeches and propaganda, all of us. But most importantly, we must ask the people to donate to the economic development programs. In the distribution of our newspaper, we must ask every individual we engage to make a contribution to our economic development programs. This should happen in all our encounters, and it should be done by every member of our party and movement. This makes the people take us even more seriously, and the people want to participate in our economic endeavors. We can name African hustlers who have achieved notoriety by fraudulently taking money from Africans who want to give to our self-reliance. We have seen this activity in Tisket without acknowledging that these crooks are taking advantage of Africans who want more than anything to see Africans become self-reliant and are willing to contribute to that end. We must allow the people to participate. Moving forward from this 7th Congress First Plenary, we have much work to do with great urgency. Top priority mandates for all departments and organizations are listed here. First and foremost, every organization or department listed in this 2020 plenary report must, in addition to studying the whole document, pay particular attention to your area of work, both for the political and organizational leadership provided here. The highest priority tasks for the party regions and all areas of work, including the African and European party members and African and Europe party members, APSC and USM, is to implement the regional strategy in 2020. This includes study and constant use of the party's organizational manual and its protocols for building the party units around from the ground up. The answers to most organizational questions are found in these party manuals. In the party manual, create your POA for building your region, that is to say your plan of action, for building your region with step-by-step timelines for accomplishing this task. Build your regional committees, fill every job description, open staff, and operate your regional hub. If you're using an Uhuru House, it must be open and staffed. Weekly Sunday rallies are mandated. Of course, all of this is affected by what's coming from COVID-19 task force under the leadership of Comrade Aisha Fields. Name other cities where offices can be opened by the party, NPDM, USM, and other mass organizations. Sponsor events featuring Chairman Omali Yeshitela annually at minimum. This is key to recruitment. Develop your Black Power, your Buy Black Power businesses as fundraisers for your regional work. Hold a monthly meeting of party and APSC regional representatives in each region, and a quarterly meeting of all party and APSC regional representatives. Build functioning local units and a local party organization. Spear sales, weekly unit meetings and fundraisings in the units. Recruit to the party in the regional level, including the NORM, the National Office of Recruitment and Membership. Bring new recruits into the party locally and regionally. Hold a regional recruitment tour to build in your target cities. Create a database of all regional members and contacts that are called regularly. Build and carry out the N2U program in your region. Hold a massive process to win new recruits and raise resources. Our newly appointed Director of Organization, that is Chimarenga Salambayo, will hold this work accountable through regular reports and oversight to make sure these goals are accomplished and that party fractions, especially in the Black is Back coalition, are built and function according to the protocols of the organizational manual. For the Africa Party forces and with the support of the whole party and movement, implement the regional strategy. Build the 2023 Party Congress that's scheduled for occupied Tanzania or South Africa. Build the International Tribunal in reparation to African people to be possibly launched at the 2023 Congress. Build economic institutions under the leadership of the Office of Deputy Chair. Comrade Tafari Mugeri will be appointed and has been appointed the Director of Organization on the African continent and will assist in building the Uhuru movement in Ghana. APDEP, the All African Peoples Development Empowerment Project, will build the Black Ankh and APDEP itself. NPDOM must emphasize the work to build the Africans Charged Genocide campaign. And this is a splendid opportunity. It's interesting. I mean, here we have the mandates calling for the development of the Black Ankh, which is our response to the Red Cross and all these other so-called aid programs that are really imperialist institutions. So we're doing that with the Black Ankh. And then we're talking about, during this period, building the campaign, really building and promoting the campaign, the Africans Charged Genocide. NPW is doing this. And if you look at how Africans are being affected in the United States in quite differently by this COVID-19, you see why we call it colonial virus, and even the explanations they give for why Africans are affected more, like bad health, for example, like bad jobs where we're located in the economic structure, for example. All of these things provide the basis for claiming genocide being made against our people. And so this is a really important campaign right now, and I think that African people are more alert to our conditions as a people than we have been for a while. So as a consequence of this COVID-19 pandemic. APSC and USM, that's the African People's Solidarity Committee and Uhuru Solidarity Movement, will carry out the campaign directed to the moneyed sector demanding reparations to the Black Power blueprint and institutions of the party. And all party members must pay dues according to protocols and timelines. Build the economic support from the African working class worldwide for the party's institutions as laid out above. Recognize that wherever we are located as the party, we are the African Socialist International. Comrades, we can do this. This is a step-by-step plan that if we begin to implement it, our whole party can and will be larger, more dynamic, and functioning in greater geographical territory. We have truly initiated the process for the liberation and unification of African people and the destruction of a social system that oppresses and sucks the blood of the toiling masses of the world. By next year at this time, our party will be at a whole new place in our revolutionary process. Vanguard Up means that we leave this plenary recognizing our responsibility to our Africa, our class, and the workers of the world. Is relate to Africa. So, comrades, I think we sort of expedited that process and gives us some time for discussion. And then I can move toward the Black is Back conference, and you can too, Uhuru. Uhuru, comrade.
Uhuru, Chairman. Well, thank you so much. I really want to appreciate you for that study and just really salute the political report to the first 7th Congress Plenary. And as you stated once before that, you know, the political report, it was written before all of this stuff broke out in regards to COVID-19, this pandemic, but everything you said in terms of even the mandates and way forward, you can see why they're so critical to especially deal with instances of imperialism and crisis, such as the pandemic we're experiencing right now. So it was almost like foretelling the future. But yeah, so really wanted to appreciate that study and just recognize the forces that are engaged with us on Facebook and on YouTube. We always like to say where people are watching from. So we have Paris, France, Spokane, Washington, Louisville, Kentucky, St. Louis, Missouri, Kuwait, occupied Azania, Augusta, Georgia, New Orleans, Louisiana, Gainesville, Florida, Riviera Beach, Houston, Texas, Dubai, St. Louis, Missouri. Did I already say that? Yes, I did. Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, Chicago, Illinois, Sierra Leone, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and St. Petersburg, Florida. Got some birthday salutes from Deputy Chair Omali Yeshitela to Comrade Chimurenga. Happy birthday, comrade. Happy revolutionary birthday, comrade. And also one from Comrade Alikia Wanyangoma says, Uhuru, happy revolutionary birthday to Comrade Chimurenga. And we have Comrade Tafari Mugeri, who is the chairman of the African Socialist Party, Occupied Azania, or South Africa, says, Uhuru, chairman, we are here, ready to fight to the death. And we are, I don't think people were expecting for it to end this early, so people are still getting their questions together. Jesse Neville says, Uhuru, happy revolutionary birthday to Chimurenga. So for those who have any questions, comrades, go ahead and type them into the comment section, whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, because we want to address your question live. The chairman will be answering your question. So it's a really exciting time for you to, get that question that you have, that burning question asked. And let's see. Okay, we got one from Comrade Jackson Hollingsworth, the African People Solidarity Committee in St. Petersburg, Florida. Says, Uhuru, chairman, really appreciate this study and this whole series. Would you say the U.S.'s plan to undermine China's economy with COVID-19 has backfired?
I think it has backfired because I think they waited too late. It's the truism by Lenin that the capitalists would sell you the rope to hang him with. That's what they did in China from the start. They just made the assumption that there was all this money to be made in China. They used to say something with more than 1 billion people, if you just sold every one of them a yard of cloth, wow, look at all the resources we can make. And China wasn't the, what they expected. They had been so accustomed to dealing with colonized people in Africa and other places, but China had a revolution under the leadership of a revolutionary party. So whatever else is true about China today in terms of its economy and the leadership, China had put in place certain philosophical and organizational principles that allowed it to, and also China believed in people's war. And one of the most significant things about people's war is to draw an enemy in, to let the enemy come in, to draw an enemy in and then surround them and wipe them out. And so he had all these imperialist forces, all of the economic interests of most of the empire concentrated in China. That's part of what they did. And that's probably what we're gonna have to do with Africa. Most of them are there now. We just don't have the organization that China has. So yeah, I think they did. And China was able to have a different kind of economy and economic. I think I've heard someplace that that they can say China is economically worse off because its economy is only growing now at 3% as opposed to 7%, while the U.S. and other places you see a complete, downward spiral of the economy. So yeah, I think that you can say that, but that's what in the CIA they call it blowback. The CIA helps to create these organizations. They help to create organizations like Al Qaeda and some of the others, and now they're fighting for their lives against Al Qaeda. It's called blowback, and that's what I think we see with this effort that they've done there. Or as we say in the community, what goes around comes around. Yeah.
True. Yes, it does. Comrade Nasir Alamin in Kuwait asks, Uhuru, can the chairman elaborate more on the challenges with intersectionality?
Well, this whole concept of intersectionality is one that attempts to equalize the struggles of all the peoples around the world and showing some kind of intersectionality. There's intersectionality with women, with Black people, with oppressed people, etc. And the reality is that, it is true that there are contradictions in all things. There are contradictions in all things, but there's also true, and this is the thing that we have to understand, is that there's a main contradiction. There's a main so you look at, for example, we say the primary contradiction in the whole world is this oppression of nations, national oppression, the relationship of oppressed nations versus oppressor nations. And the oppressor nations have come into existence, and with it, this nasty social system called capitalism. And so, but within the oppressor nation, within the nation of the people who are being oppressed, there are contradictions. There are contradictions between men and women, contradictions between workers and bosses, contradictions between homosexuals and usually the state. I almost said heterosexuals, that's etc. You have all of that. And so similar contradictions within the oppressed nation. But the primary contradiction, the one necessary for the existence of all the others, the one which all the others revolve around, is this relationship of oppressed and oppressor nations. So we say that, yeah, there's some a relationship, the fact that a lot of people are oppressed, but doesn't mean that you end the contradiction by dealing with something called intersectionality. And I think that's a way to liquidate the central contradiction that we're dealing with, which is the pedestal upon which all capitalist activity rests. The oppression of white women require, as it is under capitalism, require the existence of colonial domination of Africans and other people around the world. White women truly interested in ending oppression, not just some self-defined, self-interested thing for themselves, because they like to go around talking about sisterhood and all this sisterhood and this and that. But your sister takes care of your children when you go to your damn women lives meeting and stuff. Your African sister is the one who's doing that stuff. So we say that what has to happen is look at the central question, and women who are interested in ending the oppression of women then have to unite with overturning the social system. That's the critical question. That's some intersectionality. It's a very clever, well, not so clever, really. I almost think it's desperate, characterization of a contradiction that exists in the world. Uhuru.
Thank you, Chairman. We got a question from Comrade Tama, a part of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement in St. Petersburg. Asked the question, do you think COVID-19 was biological warfare?
I know COVID-19 is biological warfare. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I'm not, some kind of scientist or biologist or anything like that. But in order to understand the contradiction, you just can't start from where it is. You got to start from the history of the contradiction. And the history of the contradiction helps us to understand that the United States started off this attack against China some time ago. You even had this guy, Pompeo, who is the Secretary of State, traveling all around the world, telling people, don't trade with China. Go in places, trading with China is bad, telling people that if you use Huawei, we're gonna break off all kinds of economic relations and opportunities for you inside the United States, doing everything they could to bring China down. Contesting with China. China has put forth a Silk Road project, which is challenging even the primacy of things like the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. And many of the forces who were loyal and are loyal to US economic interests have now have been moving toward to China and in their own self-interest and what have you. So the United States has been working and has seen China as an existential threat. it's not just a little bit of not liking Chinese. It's an existential threat to the whole world economy is in a state of reconfiguration, and China is central to it. It's not the only force. China is central to it. Look at the U.S. hegemony in the Middle East. What do you see? One of the most dominant force, the primary force, is Iran. In addition to Iran, you had forces like Syria that compounded this contradiction that the United States finds in that area of the world. And you see Syria being a major force that the U.S. has attacked. Iran is a force that has attacked. Then look at the Americas, and you see Venezuela, and you see Evo Morales, who the United States just overthrew recently in Ecuador. And so all of these struggles, they are existential crises. They are things that greater threat than any coronavirus is perceived by the United States. Unleash this damn thing. Stop this thing that China is central to, and that is the thing they did. And so doesn't mean that Trump even knew anything about it, because I don't think he did. But it's not Trump. I'm not talking now about the stupidity of Trump. I'm talking about how the state operates and how the state has sometimes operated against people who were heads of state in the United States after having assassinated people. If these forces and if things are happening in a fashion that challenges the existing social system, if it's an existential crisis, the state has acted on its own. And I think this is what is happening here. That's why you saw the Chinese, but some of it Trump participates in. You know, he participated in having the woman who was a family member of the Huawei corporation arrested in Canada, had to put in jail in Canada. I mean, so these guys, yeah, the United States, it is biological warfare. There's no doubt about it in my mind. Yeah.
For real. Thank you, Chairman. We have Nasir says, also a statement of appreciation, just received my first Burning Spear newspaper, right on, and really benefited from the Uhuru buzzword section. Comrade Columbai Indinet, who's the international president of the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, says, I would like to salute APSP and chairman on the Black grand jury. It was life-changing for myself and my father, Uhuru president. Comrade Raymond Moses, who I believe is in Trinidad, says, thank you for enduring revolutionary steadfastness in the struggle for the liberation of all African people throughout the world. Long live Chairman Omali and the African People's Socialist Party and the sister solidarity party, the African People's Solidarity Committee. Vanguard Up, Uhuru. Uhuru. And we have one on YouTube now. Okay, so well, I have another birthday salute from Comrade Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People's Solidarity Committee. Says Uhuru saluting Chimaranga, happy revolutionary birthday. I know Chimaranga is just loving this right now. We also have a Uhuru chairman and happy born day Chimaranga from Comrade Kenya. And Kenya also asked, Chairman, please speak a bit more of how COVID-19 was deliberately geared toward Africans and the long-term impact.
Yeah, I want to say a couple of things about that. One, Comrade Kenya is Chimaranga's niece, by the way, who just wished him a happy born day. But the thing is that the United States has been involved in a long time, as we know, Africans, in a sort of a genetic targeting, you know, like with various disease that it has created. We've known this is happening. We knew it happened with AIDS and various other disease. And this is not mere speculation. I mean, there are books that have been written about it, sometimes by people who were involved in the process. So I don't have specific information about how that has worked with COVID-19, but there's no doubt about it, that it has worked. If you look at, I know that it was an attack on China, which is why it emerged initially in China. And the thing about that, by the way, is that at the moment, China claims that this is an attack on us by the United States, it's like it's acknowledging a declaration of war. And that puts both countries in this very interesting kind of place that neither of them wants to go to, because so they've been engaged in low intensity warfare. And just like with Iran, there's a lot of stuff the United States has done to Iran that Iranians don't even mention. The government doesn't mention. They bombed sites in Iran that were involved in the development of their nuclear capacity. They've kidnapped and killed scientists. They've arrested some scientists out of Iran and things like that. And they similarly carry on with China, because and Iran hasn't said anything about it. And Iran hasn't made public statements about it, because to make a public statement about it also arouses the masses of Iran. And then how do you respond to that? Just like what happened with Soleimani. When the United States bragged about targeting a missile that killed a member of the government, that's an brazen act of war. So what does the government do about this? And that's the critical question, because masses of people in Iran, wanted something to happen with this. And so the Iranians did a symbolic act of some symbolic missiles at someplace where the U.S. troops were located in Iraq. But the point I'm making is that it's hard for them to acknowledge that unless they want all-out war. And neither side wants all-out war. They just want to undermine, destroy, do what they can to cripple them. So I know that about China. And I know that what we're seeing is that a lot of people, Africans in the United States, I mean, you see the majority of cases that we're familiar with, death. I mean, you got what, 79, 80%, 71% of the, I understand that the total, the 100% of the fatalities in St. Louis, I've heard as recently yesterday, African people. So, it gives an impression that it has this kind of genetic marker on it as well. I cannot say, surely that that's specific to this disease here, because I do think the main target in this instance was China, Uhuru.
Uhuru. Yeah, I really unite with that, Chairman. And just how you've been summing up that this is the colonial virus. So Africans are going to be the ones most impacted by it, because we're dealing with the colonial contradiction.
If there's a flu, if there's hiccups, if there's anything that's out there, Africans are going to catch most of the hell, from it. I mean, we are the ones who are going to be, for various reasons, we are extraordinarily vulnerable because of colonialism, because our relationship to colonialism, because we have no power at all over our environment or anything, like that. So yeah, they did it. I mean, if you got a headache now, white power is the source.
Uhuru, it sure is. Uhuru. So I'm checking for more questions. I don't know if you've heard like I thought it was really important, even the whole conversation about like people being anti-war or even intersectional feminists or whatever. And then there's like with the whole coronavirus thing, there's this whole campaign called Coronavirus, like US, like it's all of us and we're all affected by it. So we all gotta, join together and fight coronavirus. Like that's the line. And you have all these celebrities like putting out this coronavirus. It's us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I want to just say that we mentioned Columbai was just mentioned as sending out, perhaps it was a salute to the Comrade Chimaringa, but she mentioned the Black People's Grand Jury that we did in St. Louis. And her father was one of the witnesses. Her father testified. And that's when I discovered the paramason type qualities in Comrade Columbai, who intervened and start in the questioning of her father. But I mentioned that I wanted to stop and say something about that because her father is one of those 100% victims, African victims, in St. Louis. And just a few days ago, her father succumbed to COVID-19. It is a colonial virus. And the thing about it is that, you know, people want to act surprised that this stuff is hitting Africans like this. I wish they were surprised when they were seeing the North St. Louis just disappearing right before their very eyes. Whole gentrification that's happening there, no jobs, nothing there at all. But suddenly you're surprised because the Africans are dying. Milwaukee, Africans dying. Baltimore, Africans dying. I had a situation in Baltimore recently where a white cop was walking by a housing project or something like that, and an African woman said something to him and that he didn't like. And so he walked by her and a group of Africans and coughed on them. You know, and I mean, this is our relationship. I mean, it's absolutely totally intolerable. That's what happens when you exist in some form of servitude or another. That's what colonialism is. We have to take back our power. And that's the struggle for us, is for Africans to even have the ability to envision having power, taking power over our lives, and having a memory of once having had power, which can sustain one, which can help one, you know, like to do that. Otherwise, you're trapped with understanding that the only thing that looks like power is what we experience under white people, that this is the only power that's possible. So everything, anytime you don't have the power and someone else has it over your life, they can do anything they want to, and they do anything they want to, and they have done anything they want to, and they have a lot of company doing it to us. And it's not like Trump and his administration, or Bush and his administration, or Obama and his administration, and the others did this in dark places where nobody knew what the hell was going on. The whole population knows what's going on. The whole white people know what's going on. The whole white people know it, and still many of them clamoring to put Trump right back in power, or somebody closely like Trump. And they would oppose anybody who's too far away from Trumpism. They would use somebody like Biden, for example. Or now I'm looking at this guy's name, I think is it Paulson, or who has one of the big, he and his relatives, is it Paulson or Samuels? I can't remember the name now, but he's a big shot financier, and at one of the top financial institutions in the world. And I just saw something recently, 2 or 3 days ago, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, where he is talking about how, you know, they're gonna have to do something about this income gap and change stuff so that people can have health care and better education. I mean, it could have been Bernie Sanders modified. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, that whole objective, and he was saying this in order to protect the system, which is what the enlightened sectors of the bourgeoisie are doing, whether they call themselves Bernie Sanders, or a Democrat, or Trump, you know, who's a Republican. All of them find themselves trying to protect the system in their own image. However, the system, protecting the system, is in their own image. Because, you know, for all of the so-called Medicare for all, and all of the so-called socialist political revolution that they're talking about, and all the socialism that Sanders talking about was not a socialism that replaced capitalism. What kind of damn socialism can that possibly be? To talk about, we're gonna have socialism, I'm a democratic socialist, and we have a political revolution, but it doesn't presuppose the destruction of capitalism. How are you gonna have, you're talking about you fighting for healthcare for all under capitalism? That's what you're saying. If you want healthcare for all, place the resources back into the hands of the producers. That is the workers, the people who produce all the value. Once we get control of that, that's why you ain't got no face masks, because the people who make them only make them for profit, and they don't need face masks. You know, they are already quarantined from the rest of us until they might want to venture out somehow. So anyway, that's what we're talking about, fighting against this whole opportunism. And the party is engaged in a struggle for taking power. And the objective, the task that we have before us, is to win recognition, and certainly among African people and African working class, of the need to have this power over our own lives and the ability to have this power over our own lives, and join in unity with all the oppressed peoples who are fighting against this social system. Sometimes they are fighting against the social system and don't name it what we call it or name it, but they're fighting against its expressions in their lives in different places around the world. So anyway, is there anything else right now?
Well, yeah, we have a few more questions. I'll just take a few more and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Okay. So this is from Comrade Ngone in Tampa, Florida. Says, salute the chairman. Can you please speak on the African People's Socialist Party's position on mandatory vaccines?
Mandatory vaccine?
Yeah, or I guess it could even be like this whole question of like, getting vaccination.
Let me just say that I am like you and like almost everybody, African community. We have been victimized by what's supposed to be medicine. We know even the so-called mandatory vaccine function as testing, stuff on Africans and other, colonized and subject people. I have the same fears and concerns about it that most Africans and many Africans do. And of course, that's not to say that vaccines will not help in certain instances and circumstances, but it is to say that you're looking at a system that's based on profit and the mass of the people don't have anything to do with it. You say mandatory, who made it mandatory? Like people say, well, look at China. China was draconian because they could demand that the people do this and the people do that. And we couldn't do that in America because we believe so much in freedom and stuff like that. What kind of nonsense is that? No, China had two things. China had a whole different kind of social system. The societies in much of Asia are so different in terms of collectivism as opposed to what you find with this white nationalist individualism, every white man for himself. And so there is a different kind of assumptions about what can be done and should be done by leaders in these societies. So you have a leadership in a society that is separate from the people, has no relationship to the people except for exploitation. Then it's natural that one would suspect it. And then the history of them doing things to us, like for example, there's a guy called Dr. Death in South Africa who set up on the poorest townships in South Africa. He set up these offices that were supposed to vaccinate people from HIV, from AIDS. And the project was indeed part of to give HIV/AIDS to the Africans in these townships. So our relationship with them makes suspicion absolutely normal. When they got ready to test the birth control pill, what did they do? They went to Puerto Rico and used women in Puerto Rico as the subjects for that. So yeah, I mean, it's a natural thing. It's nothing unnatural about being suspicious of the vaccines. And I can't say anything about mandatory. I don't like mandatory anything coming from U.S. imperialism, to tell you the truth. I don't like mandatory anything. Uhuru.
Uhuru. And Comrade Chimaranga said, I appreciate all the birthday greetings and Vanguard Up. Come from Chimaranga.
Well, Chimaranga, that you spoke too many words when you said greetings. I just appreciate all the birthdays.
Appreciate all the birthday greetings.
Appreciate all the birthdays, Chimaranga.
Yes. So actually that does look like, oh wait, there's one more question so one last question we'll take for Comrade Nasir. Says, can the chairman speak to why our people have forgotten Malcolm X's politics, his political analysis? Malcolm was an anti-capitalist. It's as if we have forgotten the importance of political education.
No, the truth is that even when Malcolm was alive, it was a minority of sort that even knew about him. It's not like Malcolm was was out there like that. I mean, they did everything they could to circumscribe the ability of Malcolm X to communicate with masses of people. We know much more about Malcolm. We've heard much more about Malcolm since they murdered him. This is when you heard his records and stuff, although don't misunderstand me, hundreds of people would come out just on 125th and Lenox just to hear Malcolm speak out there, etc. And Malcolm was fundamental in his criticisms of certain things about the civil rights movement, and he was in a breakout period. It was during the breakout period that they assassinated Malcolm when he was moving forward. That's, you know, he was at Oxford, and just shortly after he left speaking at Oxford, then he came back to the United States and they murdered him. So I think that, but the Malcolm had affected so many of the leading forces who were trying to do political work at that time that it was too late when they killed him. And so that's one aspect of it. The other thing is that that's partially true. The other thing is that I've been even in Ghana and have been on radio, and you know that's where Nkrumah is from, and people knew nothing about Nkrumah. I've been in Chicago. When we first started working in Chicago, Africans in Chicago had forgotten Fred Hampton. I say forgotten, that's not absolutely true. In Oakland, when we were doing work in Oakland, Huey P. Newton was no longer on the radar for people, but our oppressors controlled our information in so many different ways, and then there are contending forces in our own communities. You got preachers, you got other kinds of forces who work all the time, and they were working against Huey, they were working against the Panthers even at that time, they were working against Malcolm, they got all these forces constantly. I mean, before, you know, you had people like, what's the guy's name? Foreman, Jim, not the guy who, actually he got my lawyer, got a lawyer for me from the ACLU some years ago. He was head of the, what's the name of the organization that started the sit-ins in this country? CORE. At one time, he was head of CORE. His name was Foreman, not Jim Foreman from SNCC. And he was hired by the United States government. He followed Malcolm all over Africa. Malcolm went through Africa speaking, and this guy went behind Malcolm in Africa to say that Malcolm was all wrong, et cetera, et cetera. And then after Malcolm was killed, I'm watching him, you know, Foreman being questioned about it, and he's saying that, you know, he thinks that the United States government has something to do with it. I mean, so these guys, you had all these forces working to make sure that we wouldn't be seen or heard. And so certainly the bourgeoisie was not going to write anything more about it, not going to put out anything. And if they did, it was distorted to undermine, slander, et cetera. So I think that's the basic reason why, you know, that he was disappeared. And who was it? What novel was it where they had somebody responsible for this job with destroying history, you know, news and stuff like that, and it came up with the slogan or the saying that he who controls the past controls the present, and who controls the present controls the future, or something like that effect. So they destroy all of that. They destroy our memory of people who were quite significant to us. You know, look at Garvey. I mean, Garvey was well known, you know, but who knows Garvey? People grow up. I mean, who the hell is Marcus Garvey? And it's not just the big bourgeoisie. There are black leftists who hated Garvey, who hate him today and hold up this sellout person who worked with the United States government like W.E.B. Du Bois. And Du Bois didn't, you know, was a bright guy, and he wrote some stuff that was really significant and kind of important, but he worked with the United States government to destroy the Garvey movement. You know, so you know about him, and more people know about Du Bois than they do about Garvey. And it's incredible, you know. Anyway, thank you so much, comrade. Uhuru.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. And yeah, we were getting some more, but I know we do need to wrap up because we have an important event to go to right after this. So let me go ahead and do that. Before I do that, anything else before we close?
I just want to appreciate everybody, and especially right now, appreciate you, Comrade Akile, such a remarkable role that you're playing, you know, really remarkable role that you're playing in this struggle and in our party, in this process. I want to just express appreciation. I think you are, in many ways the face, like of our party. And that's good. And I want to remind everybody the significance of the work that the party is doing. We are institutionalizing the revolution. And our objective, everything we do is moving us toward that end. We have something like 50 economic institutions under the leadership of Comrade Omali Yeshitela, Deputy Chair. And this is the incipient independent economic economy that we're building. And if you see that much economic activity around the world has been affected by this COVID-19 thing, they sent it to hit China. They're using it to maintain a stranglehold on Venezuela and Iran and other places like that to keep them from developing. And it's playing that same kind of role with our institutions, or is attempting to. So I'm just saying that these are institutions of our people, the African nation and what have you, and that I want all of us to be conscious of that and do everything we can to support these institutions and all the institutions of our party and our movement. And having said that, just want to call on the people of Vanguard Up. We have to revolutionize our way out of here. We're not gonna walk out of here without being able to engage in the fiercest kind of struggle. And I look forward to it, and I have always for the last few years anyway. So thank you, comrades. Thank all of you lovely comrades who in occupied Tanzania, South Africa. Really love and appreciate you, and the comrades, and I know in the Bahamas, and comrades throughout Europe, United Kingdom, France, and what have you, and comrades in the Middle East. I really appreciate your presence and the work that you're doing, and every place else. We got incredible comrades who are out in the field now, who are actually going out in the field with their mask on and to educate and inform masses of African people about how to protect ourselves from the COVID-19. And this is who we are. And I just want to express my appreciation for everything that you do, and just call on everybody to be careful. We can win this when we are winning this. Just be careful and keep moving forward in Vanguard Up. Uhuru.
Thank you so much, Chairman. And thank you all of you for tuning in, sharing the study, and continue to, share it, spread this around, because this information you won't find anywhere else. And just want to say, because of time, we want everyone to know that if your question was not answered, one of our moderators will correspond with you and make sure that the chairman does see your question. This study was brought to you by the Department of Agitation and Propaganda, Winning the War of Ideas. For your worldwide revolutionary news and analysis, you can visit theburningspear.com. Also, we have consistent updates around COVID-19, really important analysis coming out around this at theburningspear.com. So make sure you go there for your first source information about this whole thing. For revolutionary radio, dynamic shows, and music by Africans all around the world, tune into Black Power 96.3 FM, broadcasting out of St. Petersburg, Florida, and accessible via the Black Power 96 app for Apple and Android, or online at blackpower96.org. Also want to say, tune in to Black Power 96 every Thursday for the People's War radio show that's talking about COVID-19, hosted by Comrade Tachara and Matope. And the show is every Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern. So if you have the app, you can download the app wherever you are. You don't need to be in St. Pete to listen to it. Or you can catch all of the latest episodes at wubp.podbean.com. Did you unite with what you heard today and want to learn more about how you can get involved with the African People's Socialist Party, or wanting to join the People's War against colonial virus? Visit apspuhuru.org for all information regarding how you can apply. Order your copy of Chairman Omali Yeshitela's latest book, Vanguard, the Advanced Attachment of the African Revolution, the Political Report to the 7th Congress, at burningspearmarketplace.com. The Uhuru Solidarity Movement's National Convention is taking place via Zoom webinar on next weekend, April 18th and 19th, and you can still register for the convention at uhurusolidarity.org. It's themed Reparations Uprising. So make sure you guys register for that very important convention by the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. And the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations has postponed the 4th annual electoral campaign school to June 13th and 14th, tentatively. And registration details for that event will be made available at blackisbackcoalition.org. However, as mentioned, in just 30 minutes, BIB will be conducting day 2 of an online discussion regarding the elections and COVID-19 following this study at 10 a.m. Eastern. So we're trying to get you out so you can jump right into that. And it'll be available to watch at facebook.com/BIB Coalition. The African National Women's Organization has postponed the Black Women's Convention themed Sisters United for the Revolution, tentatively for July 10th through the 12th, and registration details can be found at ANWO.uhuru.org. And lastly, we are calling on people to follow closely the All African Peoples Development and Empowerment Project on Facebook, or visit developmentforafrica.org for important information and helpful tips in regards to COVID-19, and also to keep up with the updates coming from Project Black Ankh, which is our response to the Red Cross. It is the Africa response. And very important work happening with Project Black Ankh, including a telehealth program that will be launched very shortly. So thank you all for tuning in. Make sure you like and subscribe to the Burning Spirit TV on YouTube to catch every episode of Omali Taught Me Sunday Study, and use this opportunity to watch every single video on that channel. Study up. This is a perfect opportunity. Thank you, comrades, and Uhuru. Join the BIB's webinar. Uhuru.
Uhuru.